Hey, it's 3 o'clock. We'll get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Before we get started, I'll take a moment to go over some housekeeping items. If you haven't already, please select Join Audio from there. You can dial in over the phone or use the computer for audio. And this webinar will be interactive. You're welcome to submit questions directly to the presenter using the Q&A feature, which is in the bottom tab. And we'll hold questions to the end, but you're welcome to submit them at any time. And note, we have an hour, and we may not be able to answer all of your questions. So remember, if you'd like the presenter to address your question, you'll need to submit it in the Q&A tab, not the chat tab. This webinar is being recorded. The recording and slides will be posted on our website within a week, and you'll also receive an email with the notification to all registrants when it's ready. And at the end of the webinar, we'll post a link to the evaluation survey in the chat tab. The evaluation survey link will also be emailed to everyone on the call by the end of the day. Lastly, if you're experiencing technical difficulties, please access the Zoom documentation link on the webinar page, or you can contact the hosts in the chat window, and we'll do our best to assist you. Okay, I think we're ready to get started. There'll be a brief pause while I start recording, but I'll be back in a moment. So welcome everyone to our first info session dedicated to the topic of CPIA recertification. I'm Scott Rule, PRIM&R's digital learning designer. We're excited that you're able to spend some time with us today. Before I introduce today's speaker, I would like to make an announcement regarding IACUC 20. Unfortunately, IACUC 20 has been canceled, but PRIM&R is planning a 2-day virtual offering in June, featuring a selection of the planned keynote, plenary, and breakout sessions from the face-to-face meeting, with plenty of opportunity for live Q&A. The virtual meeting will allow CPIA holders to earn close to the same number of continuing education credits as the live event. And more information about the virtual meeting, including dates, will be coming out soon. Also, for the first time, we're offering an IACUC boot camp, September 21 to 22 in San Diego. This is an opportunity to attend both the IACUC Fundamentals and Essentials of IACUC Administration, which are each CPIA certified for 6.5 credit hours. Registration will open in April, so please watch the PRIM&R website for more information. Okay, so I think this is where we can pass the mic over to our speaker. Our speaker today is the Vice Chair of the CPIA Council, Michelle Aparicio. The CPIA Council is the volunteer group of individuals who oversee the CPIA exam content, as well as the eligibility and recertification guidelines. They report to PRIM&R's Board of Directors and work in conjunction with PRIM&R staff and PSI, the company that administers the exam. Michelle is the director of the IACUC and IBC at Feinstein Institutes of Medical Research, Northwell Health in New York, and has 20 years of experience in the field. So at this point, we'll turn things over to Michelle. Michelle, welcome.
Thank you, Scott. Hi, everyone, and welcome. Today, we would like to break down components of the CPIA recertification process, focusing on the guidelines that govern recertification through continuing education. After this session, you will have a better understanding of what knowledge is relevant to CPIA credential holders, so you can select learning opportunities that are applicable to the credential. You'll also have tools for preparing your recertification application and understand the recertification process. Next slide. Next slide. Go back, please, Scott. First, we are going to review the CPIA recertification options. Next. The CPIA certification term is 5 years, and credential holders have the option to recertify either by taking and passing the exam or by attaining 50 eligible hours of continuing education credits. Most people opt to recertify through recertification continuing education. Credential holders with certifications that lapse for over 6 months are required to sit for the exam. Next, we'll focus on the recertification by continuing education option. Next slide. The 50 hours of continuing education credit falls in 2 buckets. At least 40 hours must meet 2 criteria. The content must be related to IACUC Administration and fall within the CPIA body of knowledge content outline. Up to 10 hours may be on other professional development topics that are related to a recertification candidate's job in support of an animal research program, but which aren't necessarily related to IACUC Administration. We'll share more on this later on. Whether or not a program counts towards continuing education credit is solely determined by whether the content meets these criteria. It is not a judgment about the quality of the program or its sponsoring organization. For example, this session, while we hope it is informative and useful to you, is not directly related to IACUC Administration nor the CPIA body of knowledge, so it does not earn continuing education credits. However, we are lucky to work in a field with so many high-quality programs that are CE approved and available to those in our space. Next slide. Next, we're going to focus on the recertification guidelines and what defines IACUC Administration for the purposes of recertification through continuing education. Next. Remember, here's the blue box covering 40 hours of CE credits. What does related to IACUC Administration mean? This is where we go back to the eligibility guidelines for sitting for the CPIA exam and take a closer look at the 7 job functions that compose IACUC Administration. It may be helpful for you to think about what regulations require the IACUC to do as opposed to what you do at your institution. Next slide. We're going to go through each of these job functions and share some specific examples of continuing education topics for each one. Next slide. To meet the eligibility guidelines, candidates must be responsible for the development, management, implementation, oversight, and administration of the IACUC protocol review process from submission to approval, and/or communicate the IACUC's decision of the protocol. For example, eligible programs may be on topics related to implementing protocol management systems or on the protocol review process. This excludes topics related to learning how to draft IACUC protocols. Similarly, being familiar with the science and how it is performed is not within the scope of the IACUC administrator role. Next slide. To meet the eligibility guidelines, candidates must be responsible for the development, management, implementation, oversight, and administration of the semi-annual program review and facility inspection process. Education opportunities that teach you or reinforce how to meet the challenges of ensuring that program review and inspections are done properly meet this requirement. However, programs on facility design do not qualify. Next slide. To meet the eligibility guidelines, Candidates must be responsible for the development, management, implementation, oversight, and administration of the preparation of or prepare themselves regulatory and administration documents, such as those filed with AAALAC, the Department of Defense, OLAW, the USDA, and the Department of Veterans Affairs. Programs that help you do these things, such as learning how to prepare for a site visit or report noncompliance, are eligible. Training personnel at your own institution to prepare for a site visit would not meet this requirement. Next slide. Educational programs that help you learn about and apply IACUC policies, procedures, and guidelines, such as programs on best practices in applying the regulations or on reducing regulatory burden, meet this requirement. Drafting or reviewing IACUC policies and procedures for your own institution does not fill this requirement. Next slide. Eligible exam candidates manage the IACUC office or provide administrative leadership or support for IACUC committee functions. This excludes service as a committee member. For instance, I am both the IACUC administrator and an IACUC member at my institution. My service as an IACUC member, however, does not count for my CPIA recertification. Next slide. Eligible exam candidates coordinate and manage continuing IACUC oversight of animal activities, often referred to as post-approval monitoring, and the investigation of animal welfare incidents, adverse events, concerns, and/or noncompliance. Programs related to these activities are eligible for continuing education credit. Participating in semi-annual inspections, if it's not part of someone's IACUC administrative duties, is not appropriate to meet this requirement. For example, someone who participates in an inspection as a safety official would not be able to claim this activity for CPIA continuing ed credit. Similarly, someone who has a job as a facilities trainer might participate in inspections as part of their training duties, but this would not be related to IACUC administration. Next slide. Eligible candidates provide and/or manage regulatory training programs for institutional staff. Eligible activities include training IACUC members on their responsibility as committee members, or training stakeholders on the regulations and how to comply with your animal research program. This does not include attending external education opportunities on topics like animal handling, husbandry, biocontainment, analgesic administration. Similarly, courses related to facility operations such as cage washing or ergonomics are not eligible. Next slide. The other criterion for the 40 hours of continuing ed credit is that the activities or programs fall within the CPIA Body of Knowledge Content Outline. This outline has 4 main categories of knowledge. Next slide. We won't go through each of these categories today. More details about each of the 4 areas can be found on the CPIA website at PRIM&R.org, where you can download the content outline for yourself. Next slide. Going back to the overall continuing education requirements, CPIAs may earn up to 10 hours of continuing education credit on professional development topics that are unrelated to IACUC administration. This is in the red box. The CPIA Council created this option to make the recertification guidelines more inclusive of the growing number of IACUC administrators that play multiple roles in the research oversight enterprise. Some of these roles are important to IACUC function or personal growth, but may not be directly related to IACUC administration. As an example, consider an IACUC administrator who is also a veterinarian, who takes a course on new trends in analgesics. While that program isn't technically related to IACUC Administration and would not be eligible for recertification credit in the blue box, she could receive credit under the professional development category. In her role as a vet who is administering the IACUC program, this course enhances her professional knowledge and therefore is also good for the program. An important rule for these 10 hours of professional development is that the topic area must be related to the recertification candidate's job, as in the example I just described. When we review the recertification tracking form in a few minutes, you'll see that there is a space on the spreadsheet for candidates to include a short 1 to 2 sentence justification for the event. The Council will evaluate this justification on a case-by-case basis. Next slide. We're going to switch gears now and review the 13 different recertification by continuing education categories. Just to avoid confusion, please be aware that one of the 13 categories has been retired, so there are actually 12 now. But the original numbering has been retained, so we'll still say 13. Next slide. CPIAs must accumulate credit in at least 2 categories, and there is a 30-hour cap on the number of hours you can earn in any single category. We'll review each one briefly now. This is a lot of information, so this overview is mainly for your future reference. Remember, the session is recorded and slides will be available online. Next slide. Category 1. Category 1 captures all forms of in-person educational events. For events that are not entirely focused on IACUC administration-related issues, partial credit may be given. Every hour of learning equals 1 credit hour, and credits are issued in 15-minute segments. So, for example, a 75-minute breakout session would amount to 1.25 credit hours. Credit is not given for internal employee trainings or attendance at IACUC meetings. Acceptable documentation consists of certificates of attendance and post-conference registration confirmations. CPIAs may earn up to a maximum of 30 credits in this category. Next slide. Category 2 captures all distance learning and digital training programs, including webinars and webcasts. Credits are calculated the same ways as in-person learning, with every hour of learning equal to 1 credit hour. These events may be viewed live or on demand. Category 2 does not include internal employer-mandated training. It also does not include time spent on listservs or online message boards. Acceptable documentation includes certificates of attendance, email confirmations, sign-in sheets or logs that detail the program title and date viewed that are signed by a supervisor. CPIAs may earn up to a maximum of 30 credits in this category. Next slide. Category 3 is participation as a faculty speaker in an IACUC administration-related program, whether it is in person or online. The credit hour ratio is for every hour of presentation, 2 credit hours are earned. This is in recognition of the event itself as well as the preparation involved. This category does not include internal trainings or talks given as part of one's job description. It also does not include participation in a mentoring program. Acceptable documentation includes statements from the sponsoring organization or copies of the agenda that list faculty members' names. CPIAs may earn up to a maximum of 30 hours in this category. Next slide. Category 4 is service as a site visitor, and 5 hours of credit are given for each day of the site visit. This does not include preparing for or participating in a site visit at one's own organization. Acceptable documentation consists of a statement from the accrediting organization that includes the dates of the visit. Note that we do not request privileged or confidential information. CPIAs may earn up to a maximum of 30 credits in this category. Next slide. Category 5 consists of authorship of articles relevant to IACUC Administration in peer-reviewed journals. CPIAs may earn up to a maximum of 30 hours in this category. Next slide. Category 6 encompasses those who serve as first authors and those who present posters relevant to IACUC Administration at an in-person conference. CPIAs may earn up to a maximum of 30 credits in this category. Next slide. Category 7 includes authorship of opinion articles or articles that are not peer-reviewed that are related to IACUC Administration. Acceptable documentation includes the article listing in the table of contents or a confirmation from the editors that the article was accepted for publication. CPIAs may earn up to a maximum of 30 credits in this category. Next slide. Category 8 consists of authorship of a published book chapter relevant to IACUC Administration. Acceptable documentation includes a listing of the chapter in the book's table of contents or a confirmation from the editors that the chapter was accepted for inclusion in the book. CPIAs may earn up to a maximum of 30 hours in this category. Next slide. Category 9 consists of item writing for the CPIA exam. Instructions can be found on the CPIA item writing webpage. CPIAs who complete this category submit exam questions to the CPIA Council, and a council member will review them and may request revisions. CPIAs may earn a maximum of 10 credits in this category. Next slide. This category covers joining a CPIA exam item writing session. Up to 10 credits can be earned per session attended. The next category, 11, has been retired, so we'll move directly to category 12. Next slide. Category 12 consists of participation in an IACUC Administration related local or regional networking group. This category was added 4 years ago, and it was created in response to CPIA credential holder feedback about the learning that occurs when colleagues are able to share their experiences with local IACUC administrators, groups that had formed in their areas. Credit is given for participation in real-time meetings, either in person or by teleconference. This category does not include participation in email listservs or message boards. Acceptable documentation consists of a document, certificate, or agenda signed by the host that includes the topics and length of the meeting, or a copy of the meeting minutes that includes the attendees, topics, and length of the meeting. CPIAs may earn a maximum of 15 credits in this category. Next slide. Category 13 is for participation in a self-study program. CPIAs may earn a maximum of 15 credits in this category. Next slide. A few housekeeping notes about documentation. All documentation should be included with the recertification application. We suggest that you keep the original copies of your research materials in case of an audit, or in case you need to reference them later. This may include agenda, course descriptions, attendance verification. When in doubt, save it. The CPIA Council reserves the right to request additional information from recertification candidates in order to ensure that they receive all of the credit they are due. This is especially true when it comes to conferences and webinars, when the CPIA Council might need session descriptors or learning objectives in order to make eligibility determinations. This information is commonly requested, especially when the Council is reviewing a program for the first time. This is undertaken in order to ensure that all recertification candidates are receiving the maximum number of credit hours they are due. Next slide. To make it easy for you to record, categorize, and submit your continuing education activities, we've created a new tracking form that summarizes the information we've just presented for quick reference and has places for you to record information as you go. This tool will help ensure consistency across all research applications and facilitate a quick recertification review process. Next slide. You can download the tracker from PRIM&R's website and keep it on your own computer for ongoing tracking. The tracking form is created in Microsoft Excel, which is widely available. You don't need a deep understanding of Excel to be able to use this tracking sheet. Next slide. The Excel sheet has tabs that include instructions, guidelines, and resources like the body of knowledge, content outline, and the continuing education categories. The tabs are located along the bottom of the sheet, not visible on this slide, or can be reached through the blue internal links in the tracker that you see here at the top of the image. One of these tabs, right within the sheet, provides examples to you in entering your own information. We'll see this on the next slide. Next slide. This is an image of the tab containing examples of how to enter activities. We'll see this close up on the next slide. Next slide. Examples of how to enter activities. Note the image has been broken in half to make it a little larger. For example, this individual attended the New Jersey Association for Biomedical Research Regional IACUC Conference. They've entered the date of the conference, the number of credits that they're requesting, 10 in this case, the CEU category, and indicated that the content fit all 4 categories in the body of knowledge. We believe this tool will be really helpful in keeping track of your activities and in promoting clear, consistent, and quick reviews at recertification time. Next slide. So
okay.
I know that
Sorry. So we do have one question in the question box, which I'll project in a second. But I'd encourage anyone who has a question, if you put it in now, we can select it. Okay, so you should in a moment see the question popping up. Okay, I'm sorry this is not popping up on your screen, but let me read it. How do I find out when I'm due for recertification?
Well, PRIM&R typically will notify you via the email address you have on file with PRIM&R, so it's always important to be diligent in making sure that PRIM&R has all your most up-to-date contact information, and keep track of when your certification is due to expire. Typically, it's about 6 months in advance of your expiration where PRIM&R will notify you.
Okay, thank you. Let me just wait about 15 or 20 seconds just to see if anyone else has any questions. If not, then we'll move ahead. Okay, here's the next question. The question is, can you touch on why the college course on IACUC, such as Drexel MLAS, is no longer considered for CEU?
So some decisions are made on a case-by-case basis. The Research Council does deliberate on all courses or activities that are not already deemed eligible and or may touch on it. So I'll have to get back to you further about that very specific inquiry.
Okay, thank you. And note, we are collecting all the questions, even if we don't get to your question, and we'll be replying. Okay, the next question. How many credits will be awarded for iCare Academy activities?
Okay, so iCare Academy activities fall under in-person conference and training. So they would fall under category 1, which are 1 hour of learning equals 1 credit hour, maximum of 30 hours.
Thank you. Okay, the next question. Do all 50 CEUs need to be submitted at one time, or can they be submitted as they're completed?
Thank you. The application must be complete prior to submission. So once you've reached 50 hours, then submit your recertification application.
Thank you. Okay, next question. There was one question put into the chat. I just asked, I'll go ahead and read it, but if you're adding questions, just make sure you're adding it to the question and answer area. And this question is, how do we find out if there is a local or regional networking group?
Well, the best way to find out used to be through that fabulous IACUC listserv, so which has just shifted over to a new platform, I believe sponsored by another organization. However, the best way is to reach out to your IACUC colleagues that are in your general area, and if a group doesn't currently exist, you may want to establish a group. Further, I think PRIM&R keeps track of which groups are already established, so you can always contact PRIM&R to see if there is a group already established in your area.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Do you recommend sending completed recertification materials a year or so in advance of expiring CPIA so that there is time to make up for any rejected hours?
Absolutely. I probably no more than a year, but within a year is appropriate. And there are certainly many opportunities, including viewing prior webinars that are recorded that could, help you get over the 50 credit line. So yes, early is better if you already know that you have 50 credits, and when in doubt, please reach out to PRIM&R and inquire specifically if there is a course or a particular continuing education activity you are not sure whether it qualifies.
Great, thank you. This question, I'm not sure if you would know the answer, but again, we'll be collecting the answers, or collecting questions and getting answers out. How educationally diverse is the PRIM&R Council?
The PRIM&R Council consists of veterinarians, IACUC administrators, research scientists, program leaders, folks with a lot of experience and a very diverse education experience.
Great, thank you.
And just,
okay, we have, sorry, go ahead.
Apologies. If I can just add, please note that when PRIM&R does select and invite folks to serve on the council, they are looking to do so with an eye towards ensuring there is a very diverse council with a particular level of expertise in various areas, so that we make sure that every potential application that comes through is getting the attention and the appropriate review that it deserves.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, the next question. Would Leadership CE be considered in the 10 hours of professional development?
I'm sorry, Scott, I didn't hear the first part of that.
Sure, I'll repeat. Would Leadership CE be considered in the 10 hours of professional development?
Well, again, that would be something that we'd have to seek the course descriptor on. We'd have to see who's providing the training and to make that determination. But typically, no.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have one more question. Again, feel free to add a few more. I'll wait a moment after we answer this one. What happens when I watch an older PRIM&R recorded webinar, but there's no option to download a CE certificate at the end?
You can always contact PRIM&R. The staff there is incredibly helpful, and they'll be more than happy to provide you with any documentation you need.
Thank you. Okay, next question. Do city courses count for CE? And that's CITI courses.
So, no, they don't at this time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll just wait just a moment to see if any more questions come through. Okay, here's another question. Are there any requirements for how many CE are webinar versus in person? So
Okay.
again, are there any requirements for how many CEs are webinars versus in person?
Yes, so in-person trainings, continuing education opportunities fall under Category 1. Online trainings and webinars fall under Category 2. And again, the maximum credit for both Category 1 and Category 2 are 30 credits. So you can earn up to 30 credits by participating in IACUC Administration related online trainings and webinars.
Thank you. Okay, another question has come in. Continuing education is important. However, why does it seem that it's much easier to retake the CPIA exam than recertify by CEUs?
Well, it depends who you ask. I don't know anybody who would want to resit for the exam, but somebody might. And again, institutional resources, as we know, are limited. So it's, I think, sensitive to that to offer the opportunity to recertify by sitting for the exam or by recertification.
Thank you.
Attending continuing education activities.
Okay. There's no questions queued up. Let me just wait a moment, and then if there are no more questions, we'll move ahead. Okay. So on behalf of all my colleagues at PRIM&R, I want to thank our speaker for developing and presenting today's webinar. And I'd like to thank all of you on the line for joining us. We hope you found the webinar beneficial and that you'll join PRIM&R for future educational opportunities. The link to the evaluation is now posted in the chat tab. Please take a moment to complete the survey as we use your feedback to plan future programming. And the link will also be emailed to all registrants this afternoon. So thank you again, and you may now disconnect.